Oh, Stefano, hi. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Good
Thank
to
you so
see
much
you.
for taking the time and everything. And
Oh, yeah.
so this is actually my first time in this. Why at the zoo?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm so glad you came to the zoo. The zoo is a perfect place to talk about the global environment. To really tell you why the zoo, let's take a walk and look at some things.
Okay, let's
Okay.
walk.
Hi, goat. Hi,
This is
goat.
pretty cool.
That's Waldo.
Wow.
So my course, The Global Environment, operates at 3 different scales. And the first scale we look at is the human body, the scale of our bodies. So the environment affects us through the food we eat, through the air we breathe, and through the water we drink. So just think about these goats. If we were to drink goat milk, well, it would matter to us what kind of food the goats had been eating in order to know what kind of the quality of the milk that we would be drinking. So the kinds of things that affect the plants and animals that we eat and consume, or the water in the rivers that becomes the water we drink, or even the air we breathe, if there are any kind of toxins or pollutants inside of those foods, well, then we get those in our body. And right now, each and every one of us have something like 100 different toxins that are in all of our bodies, just from things we got from our parents, our mother, when we were in the womb, things that we ate as children, things that we encountered growing up, the kinds of creams and lotions we use, plastics, all those things that we come in contact with our bodies. Those really affect, those are the ways that the global environment comes into and affects our bodies. So that's the first scale of the course.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
So you're an anthropologist, correct? And so what does environment means to you, like as an anthropologist? I'm just trying to figure out what it means, like within the subject and within social sciences. So what does environment mean to you?
That's a really good question. So I'm mostly interested in the environment in terms of how our social interactions shape both the environment, but also how we end up being affected by the environment, because we're not all affected equally. For example, if I have the money to buy organic foods, organic vegetables, and organic meats, I can avoid some of the toxins that other people who can't afford those foods or don't have access to those foods, they can't avoid. So as an anthropologist, I'm most interested in the inequalities and the differential ways that we all are affected by the environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it also kind of seems a little bit like a definition of the social sciences, the interactions and they're all coming together. So it actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we have to look, even as an anthropologist, we need to know things about environmental science. We need to pull from geography and history and political science and pull all these social sciences together in order to really understand any particular problem like in the environment.
I like it.
Yeah.
So you said that this was the first scale?
Yes. Let me take you over to the African savanna and we'll look at another scale for the course.
Cool. Let's go.
So welcome to the African Savanna exhibit here at the Woodland Park Zoo. This exhibit represents the second scale of the course, the global environment. And in that scale, we're looking at landscapes and we're looking at competing and contested claims to land and landscape. So, for example, if this were a real African savanna village, you would see we've got people living here, we've got a school, we've got maybe a community facility, and so people living in a setting like this would need to use the land around them for things like hunting, for things like growing crops, and at the same time, let me show you here this savanna. So here is the African savanna, and you can see the zebras out there. Sometimes they're giraffes and other kinds of animals. So other people have the vision that landscapes should be empty of human beings and should be like this, should be places that are purely for conserving wild nature. And so there's a conflict there, and that's one of the things that we talk about in this part of the course, how you negotiate between the differing kinds of claims, claims over pure nature versus claims over people's rights to access the resource in lands that they live near.
Can I ask you something? And we're probably going to cover this in the course, but so So you use land and landscape.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure if I understand the difference between the two. What do you mean by landscape?
Land and landscape. I'm not sure I'm intending to distinguish between land and landscape, but when I talk about landscape, I'm talking about a swath of land that's a setting for certain kinds of social activity to play out.
Yeah.
So even if you are deciding to make a place like this, a savanna that where you don't have people coming through the savanna hunting, you don't have people farming, you don't have people logging, things like that. It's still a social setting because it's human beings that have come and they've put boundaries around the space and they've allowed certain activities to go on and they prohibited other activities. So I see a landscape as a kind of social space or a way of talking socially about a patch of land.
Yeah. And again, I mean, this is a good example because, I mean, thinking about the fact that this is actually being built for it, so it makes a lot of sense.
I mean, if I could take everyone in the class to the African savanna, we would do it there, but I think this does a good job of kind of illustrating what we're doing in the course.
So what's the third scale?
So let me show you somewhere else.
Make me curious. Wow.
All right. So, Stefano, I brought you here to the orangutan exhibit to talk about the third scale of the global environment, and that scale is the atmosphere. And in this unit of the course, we're going to talk about the global issue of global climate change. And I brought you specifically here because I do research in this country here, the one you see in light green and yellow over here, which is the country of Indonesia. And I do research in Indonesia where people are actually going to be really strongly affected by climate change. And the issue for our course in relation to this scale of the atmosphere is that you think, okay, we all breathe the air, the climate is changing on average by a certain temperature, it must affect us all equally. Well, that's not actually true. It turns out that the people from the countries in the global north who have produced most of the emissions are going to escape some of the worst effects of climate change, and the people from the global south, from countries like Indonesia where I work, are going to have some of the experience some of the worst effects of climate change. So that's really the issue that we've got for this scale and this unit of the course.
What do you mean by global north and global south?
Global North and Global South. So these are two ways of talking about imaginary divisions in the world, but divisions based on power, finance, and histories of colonialism. So when we talk about the Global North, we're talking about primarily Europe, United States, Canada, maybe Australia, New Zealand. When we talk about the Global South, we're talking about the countries that people before have called the third world or developing countries. So it's just another way of thinking about rich and poor, the haves and have-nots, that kind of thing.
Well, it sounds beautiful. How do you think it's gonna work online? Are you excited about the opportunity to teaching it online? I'm just thinking with all these scales and it sounds beautiful. Do you think it's gonna work?
I think it's going to be great because one of the things is I'm going to ask students to get out into their own environments, into their own nearby worlds, and to reflect on the landscapes around them, to reflect on what's in their own bodies, to reflect on their own relationship to climate change by getting out into the world and then coming back to the online environment and having something to say about their experience. So I think it'll be great.
Well, I'm just so excited about it. And one last thing, and then I promise I'm gonna leave you alone.
Okay.
Is there anything that you think I could start reading or something to get prepared to the course, or any book or any author? If you don't, that's fine, but just it's so interesting, and I was just thinking.
Well, I am assigning a lot of readings.
Good to know.
So I suggest you just really work with the materials that are in the course.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
Don't worry about having to have a special kind of preparation for coming to the class.
Oh, beautiful.
Because it's all
That's
there.
Good to know.
It's all there for you when you get there.
That's good to know. Well, thank you so much. This was a beautiful journey. So
yes. Well, thanks
so
for
much.
coming out to the zoo.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Wow, I've never seen him one live before.